Another difference is that we have the cosmos, a kind of unity, where all the diversity and all the complexity of the cosmos is part of a single unity. And I call this integral unity. Integral unity means that you have the Nirgun Brahm, you have the Sagun Brahm, you have the Nirakar and the Sakar, you have the oneness, and you have all the forms, and they are all inseparable. It is not like there is a separate realm and there is a separate realm. Whereas in the biblical tradition you have God separate from souls. Even in heaven, the soul lives in God's house as a guest, but it is not oneness. It is not oneness in the sense of that being same. You live in the house owned by a host. That's heaven. But that separation is still there. And the separation of God and soul and the cosmos. The cosmos is created out of, matter, which is separate. So that matter is shaped. And this Adi Shankar talks a lot about this. Is it what is the effect? What is the cause of the universe? And what is the material cause? And so on. So this idea is very much based on that thinking, that our sense of unity is what I call an integral unity, so nothing is left out, and all the diversity and multiplicity, and what the young kid asked, difference, all that difference is part of the unity. It's inseparable from it. Even Buddhists who don't believe in Brahman have this sense of integral unity, that nothing is separate from this integral unity. Now, in the Western tradition, within Christianity there is an absence of integral unity, and then within the Greek heritage, which is the second heritage of the West, the Aristotelian logic creates a kind of what I call synthetic unity, which means that parts exist and they have been brought together. Synthetic unity is like a car. The wheel already exists by itself before the car, and the tire and the battery exists, the paint exists, and all the different parts exist and made in separate factories, and then they're assembled together. So if different components, different elements, like the speaker here, like a particular animal, like a particular whatever, if these things have separate existence, then we have to figure out how they all fit together. That is a synthetic unity. Because that synthetic unity is on the premise that the separateness of things is real. And now we have to figure out how they work together. In an integral unity, the starting point is not that there are separate things that exist. The starting point is that there is a oneness, and then how the oneness produces and becomes manifest as multiplicity. Then therefore the question of oneness, how they are stuck together, doesn't arise because they are one being. That oneness can never be compromised. Oneness can never fall apart. In a synthetic unity, you always have to keep that oneness unity together. Sometimes by force. Sometimes you artificially kind of argue and reason that they have to stay together, because there's always a fear that they may fall apart. That because it's a construction, the unifying, what unites all the parts of a car into a car is a sort of an effort that somebody has made, and they may fall apart. So whereas in the integral unity there is no such risk that things will fall apart, because the underlying unity is the ultimate reality anyway. So this dichotomy, the huge difference between the philosophies based on integral unity and the philosophies based on synthetic unity is brought out in this book, in chapter 3. It's a large chapter. And I also show that there is another synthesis in the West. There are 5 events in Western history that I mentioned, 5 different major milestones in Western history, when the synthetic unity keeps getting more synthesized, more things get added. So the biblical sense of unity then has the Greek thought brought in to add philosophy and theology, and so this biblical, what is called the Hebraic tradition, the Hebraic tradition is the biblical tradition, and the Hellenistic tradition, which is the Greek tradition, are brought together and merged into a synthetic unity in the West. And then when they discover colonies, when they discover Native Americans, when they discover civilizations in Africa, various elements from these places get digested and assimilated and appropriated here and there and made part of the West. And I show how that is also a synthetic unity, because these are outside things that are sort of brought in. And then I go on to show 5 major milestones of where the West, how the West has been put together as a kind of an artificial construct, because there is no underlying unified West, which is an eternal construct. This is the second big. The third major difference pointed out is that Indians have a greater comfort with what Westerners would call chaos. Westerners would call chaos. I noticed this for the first time when I was in the corporate world having meetings with Indians and Westerners. We would have project meeting, and Indians are always talking to each other simultaneously. So 1 is talking to 2, 3 is talking to 4, 5 is listening to 3 and talking to 6. And a lot of this conversation going on. And everybody relaxed, going on. And the Westerners very uncomfortable, sort of sitting there quiet, not saying too much. And then when the meeting would be over, everybody, all the Indians would go away, because they've sort of filtered out all the parallel processing going on. They filtered out and figured out, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And then I would almost always have 1 or 2 Westerners come to me and say, Rajiv, I don't know what happened. I have no clue what they're saying, and so on. So I then realized that they need linear thinking, a linear 1, 2, 3 flowchart, this plan, like that, one thing at a time. So I started having free brainstorm where all the Indians could sort of do all their thing, freely talk, everybody talk at the same time. And then I'd say, okay, now we stop. And for the benefit of those who want it in a very systematic way, we come up with a linear program and plan. And that way everybody is happy. So I started doing this in my life, And then I came across a book by Andrew Rotter, a historian in the US, one of the universities. He wrote a book on Americans' attitudes towards India. And he did some research during the Cold War. And he found that US leaders, from president and head of CIA, head of the FBI, State Department, and all these kind of people, their secret correspondence when they were talking about, is India a friend or foe? Are they in the Soviet camp? And do we go with Pakistan or not? And all the secret conversation going on during the Nehru era, it became sort of, he got these things declassified, and then he wrote a book. And he showed that one of the very big concerns the American senior thinkers had, the discomfort with India, was the Indians were very unchaotic. We were very chaotic, very unpredictable. And some of them gave arguments like, if they believe in 300 million gods, then they don't have a sense of truth. Then one day they will say, this is my truth, one day they will say, that is my truth. They don't have a canon, one group set of laws, because they have too many. And therefore they would make an unreliable ally, because they have moral relativism. They don't have moral determinism. They do not know what is true in a consistent way. This kind of an attitude. And then I argued, and then I show in this book, that dharma is very contextual. And this very complex dharma, that it is very context sensitive, like in the Mahabharata. In a certain situation, you would do something, which in another situation you would not do. And Manu also in Manu Smriti says that the dharma of a certain community in a certain circumstance would be different from another community in another circumstance. And your individual dharma, your swadharma, may require you to do some action which somebody else's swadharma would not. So this very contextual dharma, as opposed to what the Westerners call normative dharma, like 10 commandments, thou shalt not kill. Now Manu would not say thou shalt not kill, because it's too generic. Thou shalt not kill in war. Well, of course they kill in war. Thou shalt not kill animals, but they are non-vegetarians. So when you say thou shalt not kill whom? So thou shalt not kill, you don't have a death penalty, but they have a death penalty. Thou shalt not kill bacteria, then you should remove antibiotics. Thou shalt not kill plants, well then you can't eat anything. So thou shalt not kill is too context-free, context-independent. Whereas the whole Manusmriti and the whole Dharma is very contextual, full of nuance. Now, this very complex way of life has been seen by the simpler Western mind. Western mind has less complexity. It has been seen by them as chaotic. And when the British were ruling, the East India Company wanted to find out what is the Hindu law under which we can rule. Because they had the biblical law, and they had their own law. So they said we should rule Indians with Hindu law. So in the 1700s, they got a panel of Pandits to come up with a standard compilation of Hindu law. So these Pandits compiled many Dharma Shastras, and different Pandits came up with, okay, this Dharma Shastra says you do this, another one said, but this Dharma Shastra says you do that. And they disbanded it, the British disbanded this because they figured that these Pandits must be lying. And in fact, they said that these Pandits are not capable of telling the truth because they say different things and they contradict each other. So this is full of contradictions, it's chaotic. That was the conclusion. And then Sir William Jones, got a second panel of Pandits, and this time they were asked to produce one set of laws. So these Pandits produced one kind of something that the Westerners would consider to be very orderly and legal and systematic and absolute laws. And it was published in England. It was originally called The Laws of the Gentoos. Gentoos meaning Gentile. The Laws of the Gentoos was the first title of this book, published in the late 1700s. And then they later felt that's a bit insulting, and they changed, in the next issue, they changed the title to The Laws of the Hindus. So this is how these very normative laws of the Hindus were created. But until this happened, there had never been one Hindu law in history, because every king would have a certain set of dharmic principles, which another king may have a different set of dharmic principles, and also the adjudication. It said, Manu says that the adjudication of disputes should keep in mind the dharma of a particular jati and a particular place and a particular set of circumstances, and it is not an absolute thing. So this is why the book, The Difficulty of Being Good, which came out, Guru Charan Das wrote, which argues how Mahabharata, sometimes they say you should do this and sometimes you should do that. And it's a difficulty of being good because the complexity of dharma is like that. So that's how it is. So this idea of Western discomfort with Indian chaos became crystallized when I was at Kumbh Mela. I was at Kumbh Mela and everything is happening. I was having a good time. I was invited guest of Swami Abdeshanand Giri. He is the head of the Juna Akhada, and all the sadhus, Naga sadhus, they are all part of the Juna Akhada, and tens of thousands, lakhs of these sadhus were there. So I was his guest, and I went with him and bathed with the Naga sadhus. I mean, I had a real good time. So when the trip was over and my taxi was waiting, bags packed, sitting in the taxi, so I went to do pranam to my host, thank him. There was an American TV crew interview from ABC, Sunday morning show. There's a show on Sunday called Sunday Morning. And so this crew was interviewing him, and they had been there for a month interviewing people on Kumbh Mela. So Swamiji says, there is this guy Rajiv, he's from US, you should interview him also, see what he has to say, maybe he says something different. So these guys said, will you wait for 5 minutes? We'd like to ask you some questions. I said, sure. And this 5-minute interview turned out to be 3 hours because of what I said. And here's what happened. The guy on the camera says, we've been here a month, we've talked to hundreds of people, and we're always asking the same question, and we're not very clear on what the answer is. So we want to ask you also the same question. And the question is, when we go back to the US and we have to do this documentary on Kumbh Mela, how do we explain to them the meaning of all this chaos? That was his question. So I said, you see, the chaos is not out there, the chaos is inside you. Because your cognitive system, which is rule-based, simplicity, a few parameters, a certain level of complexity you can handle, is experiencing cognitive overload. So your system crashes. Your system crashes because there's far too much coming and it doesn't fit your template. Your template cannot handle all this. And so what you are experiencing is inside you. The chaos is inside you. That experience of being overwhelmed by complexity that is way beyond what you can handle, that feeling is what you're calling chaos out there, but it is not out there. And I said, if you go, for example, you just look at that guy, he's walking around, he's not very feeling chaotic, he's just walking around. And this guy is eating something, and that guy is taking a bath, and this guy is chatting with that guy. Each of them is quite fine with what is happening. But see, the thing is that in Kumbh Mela, I told this guy, I said, there is no event manager. There is no itinerary. There's nobody who sent out 50 million invites. They didn't go to a website and register to come. They've been doing this for thousands of years. They just have astrological calculations and they figure out, okay, I'm going to go take my family, I'm going to go there. They go there. And that's it. And this way a lot of people come and they... So I explained to him that Indian culture, if you try to look at it through the eyes of Western culture, it will look chaotic. It will. And of course, many Indians are very embarrassed of it. So he told me, he said, this is very interesting insight you've given me, because most people I talked to were apologetic. They were saying that, you know, we are primitive, we're still old, we're still old-fashioned, we're poor, maybe we'll add more rules next time in 10 years, maybe we'll do it better, maybe not so chaotic and so on. So I said that actually, they are self-organized. You should use the word, introduce the word in your vocabulary, that certain systems are centrally organized. Central nodal point from where the rules are made, where the directions are given, it is centrally organized. And then there is an alternative system which is self-organized. In India, there is something called, in the economy, they have a word called the organized sector. And then the word used to be, for those who are not in the organized sector, the word used to be disorganized sector. But then people protested, so they called it unorganized sector. Now I propose it should be called self-organized, because these communities are self-organized. I lived in Nagapattinam when there was a tsunami and we did a youth hospital project, so I lived there for several months, and I found that they are pretty organized on their own, in their own way. They're organized as a very tiny group, as a tiny decentralized system. So if you look at the organic world, plants are like that. You look at every cell is sort of self-organized. It's not waiting for orders from some central CPU to tell you do this and do that. Its own functioning is organized, and then it's a bottom-up. These little cells are built into bigger ones and leaves, and then the whole tree, and then the whole forest. It's all very decentralized, organized. And this goes back to that kid's question about the nature of difference. The nature of difference is so profound in our civilization, because Brahman is involuted. That word was developed by Swami Vivekananda to say that evolution happens later. Evolution is possible because Brahman is involuted into matter. Because Brahman is involuted, means entered into matter. Therefore, the intelligence is decentralized, it's everywhere. So we do not have a need for some human being to sit down in a central place and, like a Vatican, like a church authority or an empire or something, and make rules and enforce them on everybody. Because the cosmos is decentralized with its own intelligence, since Brahman is involuted everywhere. Even every electron has Brahman involuted. And therefore evolution is a natural outcome of the intelligence being there already. And this was Swami Vivekananda's I think one of the most profound contributions at a time when the Darwin's evolution theory had come out, and there was a war between science and religion in the West. The religion people saying that this evolution is very mechanical, it does not need God, and the scientific people saying yes, God would not have created the world. And that's when Vivekananda said that you can actually have both, because God involutes in matter, and therefore matter then evolves. And this idea of involution followed by evolution was picked up by Sri Aurobindo into a huge thesis of his. So this is the 150th anniversary year of Swami Vivekananda, and I was invited to Belur Math to meet the General Secretary and various people at the head of the Ramakrishna Mission, and they asked me to write an article on this point in their anniversary book, 150th anniversary book. I was invited to write an article which actually is due in 15 days. I haven't started writing it, but the article I'm writing is on Swami Vivekananda's huge contribution to the idea of involution resulting in evolution. Now if you have that kind of a worldview, then this is not chaos. It is the divine play. And those who come from a view of a simple universe, simple cosmology, simple laws, centrally managed, they cannot handle so much complexity, and for them difference is a problem, and they come up with words like chaos. Do you know in Sanskrit, and I've asked this to many Sanskrit scholars, I couldn't find a word for chaos. It means that idea, that experience is not there. It is not the same as pralay. I mean, there's many words that capture one aspect of its meaning. But what the Westerners call chaos, with a lot of fear in it and kind of evil in it, is that same word is not there.